Hey everybody, welcome to Q&A Wednesday, where I answer the questions that you have about your health and fitness goals. Now, again, I pick questions depending on what some of my clients have been working with or something that's very common. And this is a really, really good one because I've had somebody ask me recently and talk about this. So we're going to talk a little bit about why quitting bad habits is so difficult. Now, you might notice that I'm not in my regular studio. I'm not outside. I just needed a quiet space somewhere that was nice and cool. And this is going to be it today. So we'll return back to our studio when it's not so crazy hot. It is like ridiculously hot here in the Pacific Northwest. I know that we're breaking, I don't know if we're breaking records, but we're really, really close. Yesterday was like 117. I know in the Seattle area, they're having major issues with like roads buckling and doing crazy things because they're just not used to that kind of weather. So anyway, it's just too much to be outside, and I definitely can't be in my studio, which is built into the garage. So anyway, it's nice and quiet here. It's nice and cool here. So this is great. I just want to really quickly, part of being healthy, there's a lot of psychology involved in that. And so I do like to talk about how to overcome some of the issues that you might have. Because there's a lot more to it. You know, the physical part, I always tell people the physical part's the easy part. It's the mental and emotional that's much, much more difficult. Because most of us, you know, yeah, we can get up and make breakfast, but then we start playing these games in our heads like, well, I kind of deserve a cookie. So, you know, there's a lot to that. So we're going to talk a little bit about why quitting bad habits are so difficult and give you some tips on how to overcome that. And these can apply to any sort of a bad habit. And now I'm going to qualify a bad habit as something that you do that you don't necessarily want to do or you're trying to change, right? We all have lots and lots of habits. If you think about things that we learn to do unconsciously, you know, in the beginning when you first started to drive, you did everything you were supposed to in driver's ed, right? You're like, look over your shoulder, make sure your seatbelt's on, make sure you look in the mirror, all those things. And after a while, you get really good at doing it and you don't have to think about it anymore because it's already been a habit, right? So all of a sudden you drive to work and you're at work and you don't remember doing all those things that you had to be so conscious about. And so when I start working with somebody new, especially when it comes to the training and the exercise portion of it, the lifting, I really do a lot of, you're going to have to consciously think about what you're doing for a little bit until, you know, muscle memory kicks in, you know what to do each time, you don't have to think about it. That's just part of it. So we get really ingrained in doing these habits and they're sometimes really, really hard to overcome. So let's talk about why those bad habits are so difficult to quit. First of all, most of the time, some of those things are tied to some sort of comfort or memory or an emotion. You know, that's why they call it comfort food. And I don't always like to stick with food because there's other things that we're dealing with, but that is kind of a good portion of that. I know I don't have my ring light, so that's why the lighting in here is super weird. It's actually my daughter's room and I've got the window open, but anyway, so it's tied to something. Like I said, that's why they call it comfort food. That's why, you know, it makes us feel better, even if it's just briefly. There's more to it, but it is. If you think about when you were little and maybe you like fell down and got a boo-boo and then, you know, mom took you for ice cream. And so of course now ice cream's like your thing because it makes you feel better. There's something very, very real tied to that. And of course, on top of that, we'll talk a little bit about how a lot of that food's addicting. And of course, sugar is an addicting substance. It should be called the extra drug. But that's part of it. So, you know, if you think about trying to undo a habit that you've been doing for a long time, you know, our vibration changes, how it feels changes. If you've noticed, you know, we talk a lot about the gut microbiome, you know, the gut health, the bacteria. You know, when you go to do something new and you're really nervous and it feels like butterflies in your stomach, there's something to that. It's actually how it feels. And so when we go to change a habit, to do something new, that's why it's kind of scary because it feels different. We don't like that. We're creatures of habit. We like comfort. And that's actually a big deal when it comes to some major, major things, like even, you know, getting out of bad relationships or abuse. It's really difficult to do because it's different and it's change, and those vibrational changes are uncomfortable. So when you go to make a change, you're going to have to be uncomfortable for a little while and you're going to have to be okay with that. That's just kind of part of it. But again, part of it is just, it's tied to something. Hey, Leanna. It's tied to something either emotional or a good memory, or it makes it really, really difficult to do, you know, especially if it's maybe something that you come home after work, you're tired. So you pour yourself a glass of wine as soon as you walk in the door. And so you equate that with relaxation. You want to do that. So again, part of it, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that you're benefiting from those bad habits. That's part of it, right? So if it's tied to something, it's going to become really difficult to do something different. Now, we are going to talk about one of the tips that I have, which is you can't just wipe out a bad habit and not replace it with something. If you leave that vacuum, that hole, you're going to struggle, right? You have to replace it with another habit versus stop doing it, right? So that's part of it. We're going to come to that in just a second. The other thing is that, again, it becomes unconscious over time. So it really depends on how long you've been doing that habit, right? So, when I decided to get healthy, I'd been doing some specific things for several decades. It's very, very difficult to immediately change that. So when people say, I want to accomplish this goal really fast, like how fast can I lose 30 pounds? I'm like, it depends on what your habits are, right? It's going to take time to change those habits. And part of it is, that's why don't change too many things at once, because it's just too overwhelming and you're trying to undo things that are already programmed, right? You've already programmed them into your system. It's going to take some time to undo that. And again, you're going to have to replace that with some different programming. So that is a good portion of it. If you've ever, it really does come down to, like, if you've ever gotten home and you throw your keys in a certain place and you come through a certain door and then you have that trigger of, now I need to do whatever it is. Again, pour that glass of wine, eat that ice cream because you do it every time. If you've ever heard in psychology, Pavlov's dogs, right? They taught these dogs that when they would ring the bell, they would get fed, right? So at some point, after a while, all they did was ring the bell. And they didn't even get fed, but they would already salivate because they equated the fact they were going to get fed to that bell, right? So it's kind of the same thing. If you tend to do the same thing every time, that's what's going to happen. So you become conditioned to doing that, and you have to figure out how to change that. So the one thing that you're not going to want to hear is that whatever that bad habit is that you're trying to change, whatever it is, it's benefiting you in some way. I know you don't want to hear that, because maybe it really isn't. You don't feel it is. Maybe, you open a bag of, I used a picture of chips today because a lot of people say, well, I don't have a sweet tooth, but I eat a lot of chips. I'm like, well, what do you think that turns into in your system? Okay, I just forgot what I was just going to say. Oh, benefiting you in some way. So you might think, yeah, it's really not. But if it wasn't, you would stop doing it. So whatever that benefit is, right? Maybe because you're eating sugar, it's a dopamine release. Maybe because, you really don't want to go to the gym and you need to catch up on your sleep and you have all these other things that get in the way and that doesn't sound fun. Again, you're benefiting from that habit, whether it's a habit of doing something or a habit of not doing something, like going to the gym or exercising or whatever it is, you're benefiting from it. So one of the things that might be happening is that a lot of people use tools like food as a coping mechanism, right? I know that I used to eat whatever sweets, that was my drug of choice is sugar. We eat it because we feel good briefly, right? So I get stressed out. That's when I would eat junk. I would tend to eat because I get stressed out. And my first thought is I need chocolate, or bored. Like I feel like I'm just sitting here. I need to do something. So those were the two triggers for me. I had to find different coping tools or coping mechanisms so that when I had that trigger that I wasn't reaching for, the hostess, whatever. So part of it is figuring out new coping mechanisms. And I work with people on this all the time. That's why the psychology portion of it is so important. There is going to be some new education coming up on my membership platform, my website there, dealing with nutrition, health, and weight loss psychology, because again, there's so much to it. And I think we don't think about that portion of it, that, wow, what am I doing? I'm self-sabotaging myself. There's something that's being involved there. So working with that is really super important. I do work with people all the time that say, I just was stressed out. And so then I got in the closet and, the pantry, and I just ate everything I could find. It happens. So first of all, you're not alone. Second of all, I am not immune. I do eat my feelings once in a while. It does happen. That's just, part of it. But part of it is I do have better coping skills. Most of the time that works. And we'll talk a little bit about what those should be. We'll come back to that. So coping skills, you also, every time, like if eating junk, unhealthy food is part of your bad habit you're trying to quit, you get a dopamine hit, right? Same thing with your phone. If you're addicted to checking your phone at all times of the day, or that's the first thing you do when you wake up, or you're having a hard time going to bed because you're on social media, because you want to see if you got a zillion likes on that thing. Believe it or not, that is part of health, right? You've got to think about how that's affecting you. Is it keeping you from other things? That dopamine release is what you're benefiting from. So again, part of getting rid of a bad habit is you are still benefiting from it in some way that's keeping you there. So one of my favorite quotes, I don't even remember where I heard it, a long time ago, but I use it all the time. You will remain the same until the pain of remaining the same is greater than the pain of change. And what I mean by that is it is really hard to change until that thing, whatever that habit is, gets to the point where you've either hit the bottom, it's hurting you, you can't deal with it any longer, that I am willing to do the change, which is very, very difficult, but it's easier than the pain that I'm dealing with over here, right? And some people never hit that point. I've seen people that have almost died, or have been told by their doctor they only have so long to live, or they're on the cusp of getting diabetes and it still doesn't change their habit. So everybody's motivated a little bit differently. I really wish people would take a little more care and seriousness and thought about their health, especially right now. But you can't make people do things they don't want. So it does have to be, it's up to you, right? It's up to you. However, that being said, one of my tips is that if you are really, really struggling, you might need to get some professional help. And there is literally nothing wrong with that. Whatever it is, it might be you just don't know the coping mechanism, the tool, figuring out how to deal with that trigger. There might be something to that. There's nothing wrong with that. It's a tool, right? Another reason why it might be so hard is you just don't have any motivation, and we've all been there. It sounds good. I'd like to do that, but I'm just not motivated. So again, something about it has to make you excited. There is another half to the motivation, which is being, okay, now I can't think of the word. It's been one of those days. Committed, right? You have to be committed, because you're not always, even if you are motivated and it feels you're excited and you're going to do that because you can imagine how is it going to feel when you, whatever it is, when you are able to fit that pair of pants you haven't been able to fit in 10 years, whatever it is, you're going to feel amazing. But tomorrow you're going to wake up and you're going to be frustrated and the kids are screaming at you and it's hard and it's cold or hot and you just don't want to leave the house. You got to be committed. You got to focus and you got to be there, because you're not always going to feel like it. So that's a big part of it. But if you don't even have motivation in the first place, you're just not going to get there. It's very difficult. So figure out, I usually tell people, because it's difficult. We cycle, right? We're excited, our energy's up, it's very exciting. And then we realize it's going to take more work than we thought it was. And so then our motivation wanes a little bit, and then things happen in our lives, a loved one gets sick and the kids can't sleep or they're throwing up or whatever, and so our motivation goes down, and then we hit a low and then we get frustrated because we've just eaten the entire gallon of ice cream. Again, it happens. First of all, you need to realize you are not alone, and unfortunately it's normal, but you're not alone, and people do make it through it. You can do it. That's part of it. Sometimes we think of ourselves, I'm such a failure. It happens for everybody. You have to fall down. You can't, if you don't know how it feels to be weak and frustrated and guilty, it's really difficult to rise through it, because you don't have a comparison. But then when you hit the bottom and you get remotivated and rejuvenated, or maybe I let my clients text me 24/7 because I know they're going to have some of those days. And so sometimes it's frustration. Sometimes it's just, can I have this? But sometimes you just need that extra person who understands, right? That extra support. Okay. The other thing to think about is some people make it very easy to not change that habit. And what I mean by that, I don't know if I said that right, but point being is that, if you're really trying to get off of eating a certain, like Lay's chips, or mine would be like M&Ms because they are crack, right? I got to stop bringing it home. I got to not make it easy to get into that. And then I have to have a conversation, and I've had to do this in the past, conversation with my family and say, look, I need your support. You guys are my very best, support network. I need your help. Please don't bring this stuff home. It's fine if you eat it, if that's your choice. That's up to you, but please don't bring it home, because then I struggle with it, right? So you kind of got to get people on your page. I know sometimes it's very difficult. If you are a college student living at home still and your parents are like, I don't care, I'm gonna eat whatever I want. I get it. It's very, very difficult. I work with a lot of nurses who struggle because the break room at their work is full of stuff. It's amazing how doctors' offices tend to have a lot of junk in their break room. So that might make it difficult, but if you can set yourself up for success, then you're going to be much, much better off. I just don't bring it home, because if it's home and I get stressed out, the M&Ms are going in. So I just don't bring it home. So you've got to set yourself up to make it easier. So if you don't do that, I've had clients where they're like, but I'm bringing it home for my kids. So you're trying to cause the same problem for your kids as they become adults. Fantastic. So I think we don't think about that. Our children learn from us. We're their best example. So My kids actually in the last decade have watched mom get healthy, struggle with it, get better at it, have ups and downs, and they know. Even my 13-year-old who does not care because he's a boy, still can tell you that has not enough protein in it. I need to eat more protein. That's junk food. So they do get it. They do pay attention. The other thing is some of us are perfectionists. I know this by experience. And so it's kind of an all or nothing. We're like, I'm going to go to the gym 5 days a week and I'm going to do this and I'm going to do that. And then when we fall down one day and we don't accomplish it, we give up, right? Because if I can't do it 1,000,000%, then I can't do it at all. And we really have to take a couple steps back and go, you know what? I did good this week. I didn't do great, but that's okay, right? And that's a hard one for perfectionists. But it's okay. You're not going to be perfect, and success is not linear. And what I mean by that is this is not going to be your success. It's not going to be a straight line. You're not going to do a 500 calorie a day deficit in what you eat and you're immediately going to lose a pound a week. It does not work that way. Usually we do something, we either self-sabotage or something happens or friends invite us out and we just have no willpower, whatever it is. Willpower is a whole different topic for another day. If you're really kind of stacking the odds against yourself by not getting all the right foods in during the day and some other stuff, that can be really hard. It's not even willpower, it's hormones. But again, we have to figure out how to make it work for us. So even if it's just changing one or two things and just giving it some consistency is always better than perfection, seriously. And like I said, success is not linear. You're going to be up, down, everywhere. Like that's just part of it. Ask anybody who's actually reached their goal. They struggled somewhere. So here's some tips. We already talked about, don't be afraid to get professional help. If it's something that you're really struggling with, that you don't have the ability yourself, you might need somebody to help teach you those tools. And that's an okay thing. Like seriously, for everybody. I think in this day and age, there is no stigma for asking for help, whether it's, going to a psychologist or whatever needs to happen. There's nothing wrong with that. We talked about don't just try to stop the bad habit. You have to replace it with something else. When you leave something, if you take something away and you leave a vacuum, something has to fill it. And if you don't, again, it's just going to be another bad habit, such as changing one addiction for another. I see that all the time. People who quit smoking and then start eating because, food becomes their new addiction. So we have to make sure we're purposely replacing that with something better. So it could be, maybe if you do come home every night after work and you want a glass of wine, maybe you replace it with a spritzer, right? Like something different. You're going to have a couple of vices. It's okay. Just try to make them as non-unhealthy or just, you don't want to do damage, right? So, but find something that works. If you're struggling with one thing, replace it with something else. And it's going to take some time. You have to understand, listen, if you've had a habit and I'm 46 years old. If it's something I've been doing for 40 years, that's going to be a heck of a lot harder to break that habit than it is something I've only been doing for a couple of years. Fortunately, at this point, I've been eating well and exercising and working on those things for more than a decade. So I think I've got it down. I think to me, it's more of a lifestyle versus just a habit. And I think we forget whatever you have to do to reach your goal, you have to keep doing to maintain your goal. It has to be sustainable. That's why I don't like diets. That's why I don't like New Year's resolutions. It's okay once in a while to have a short-term goal and do a diet, which I don't like those anyway. But whatever you do, nobody wants to go completely backwards. So you've got to make it sustainable. And the other thing I would tell you is don't guilt yourself. We all struggle, all of us. You just don't see all of it. I try to make sure that people know I'm human and that I have ups and downs and I have those days, but I'm not going to put all of my wins and losses on social media. I try to do enough to inspire people and educate, but not everybody needs to know, that I had a mental breakdown that day and whatever it was. So again, don't guilt yourself. There's no benefit. Here's the other thing. Even if you fail, it doesn't even matter how many times you fail, get back up. I've heard people say, well, I'm a bad person. I didn't do well this week. That makes me a bad person. But that does not make you a bad person. Being a jerk makes you a bad person. We all struggle with those things. And unfortunately, the odds are stacked against you. When it comes, especially if it's something where it's a food goal, which again can become an addiction. The food industry wants you to be addicted to it. That's why they make these foods so you can't stop eating it. Once you start eating it, it's really difficult to stop. They want you to keep eating it. So, okay, Michael says it's so true. Yeah, all right. So that's a great tip, girl. If you eat all your food. That is a good one. If you're struggling with a bad habit when it comes to food or binging or getting into things you shouldn't, one of the biggest ways that you can help yourself is make sure that you're eating all your normal good meals so that you don't hit that point where you're just eating garbage, right? Part of having cravings, it's a couple of fold, but part of it is making sure, in order to avoid that, eat enough healthy food that your body isn't craving nutrients and thereby giving you a trigger, right? That's part of it. So hopefully that helps. Like I said, it doesn't matter what kind of bad habit you're talking about. They're difficult. They are. Like I said, most of us have been doing some of this for several decades. Very difficult to overcome bad habits that we've had for decades. A brand new partnership platform that is pure education, and it's great. It's simple. It avoids there's so much noise on the internet. Sometimes it's hard to know what is real, what is not. Is this a healthy food? It says it's healthy. It says organic. That means nothing. So really great information. Lots of videos that are educating you right with the basics. Super simple, and new content being added every day. I will post the link down below so that you can go to that. You can also see all my past Q&A Wednesdays by going to my YouTube channel under Fillmore Fitness and subscribing. Well, you can watch all the old ones, but you can also subscribe so when the new ones are popping up that you get notified. So have an incredible week, you guys. Hang in there. I know it's so hot. Yesterday I said my eyeballs are sweating. It's just too hot. It's sad because I like to go outside and I feel like I can't.